So maybe initially, right, when you're two, you can discuss everything. Also, when you're a team of three, you can discuss everything. This works for quite some time, but there is also then times where you have to basically start managing, right? So your job is no more just doing things and then, well, informing everyone around it and discussing it with everyone, but your job becomes creating structure so everyone and each one can basically work to get together, ideally independent of you. And this was something that I think I found quite a big insight, right? But then in the end, right, you at some point it transitions to you trying to set up structures that actually work without you. So you can actually kind of disappear tomorrow, but somehow the machine would still keep running.
Welcome to the Founders Cookbook podcast, where B2B tech founders share their journey and their secret recipes. I'm Padrig Guillard, a Webflow user helping B2B companies boosting their conversion. And today I'm sitting with Pascal Weber, co-founder at Manukai.
Hi.
I'm really glad to have him here today so he can share his journey, but also how they use AI in the manufacturing market. So Pascal, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am good today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So for the audience who doesn't know you or Manukai, could you please introduce yourself and what Manukai do?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Pascal, co-founder and CEO of Manukai. So what you see in manufacturing across pretty much all the manufacturing industries is that there still is significant time needed to produce the highly precise cut metal parts that you use in machines, cars, planes, you name the industry. And yeah, we do that. We automate that process. So try to make it quicker, reduce the time that they actually need to market, and then also the efficiency while producing the parts. So you can do that in a much more cost efficient way.
Okay, really interesting. So yeah, that's what, useful usage of AI that's different from, generating images and all the crazy stuff that we can see. So yeah, I'm really interested about learning more about that. So what was the original problem that you saw that led you to create Manukai in the first place?
Sure. It all started out of academia. So me, my co-founder Daniel, we both studied computational science and engineering, where we basically learned how to take AI and apply it in non-mainstream applications. So really figure out how can you deal with low data regime, how can you deal with maybe more complex modalities than just language and images, but still create use out of the most modern algorithms that are out there that help with language and images. And yeah, we basically started interviewing the market. We did around 200 interviews before discovering the use case I mentioned. And there it was really a clear message from our now first client that said, look, the guy on the shop floor is still working like I was 30 years ago. Imagine 30 years ago, a computer was size the room and it had the same amount of compute power than my smartwatch has today. But still the guy is doing the same clicking that I was doing. And I think that could be maybe something that you want to change. And yeah, we said, yes, that's something we can do. And indeed, we discovered that there is a big enough need and a big enough pain after all to be solved.
So basically, you had an idea about applying AI to the manufacturing market, but before speaking to those 200, client or potential clients, didn't know yet what was the how you would create or how you would use AI to solve those pain points.
Yeah, exactly. So we just came with this broad expertise in the space, so in basically AI for engineering and science. And we knew there is a bunch of things we could solve with it, but yeah, it took quite a bit of time to identify the one problem that is worth solving. And it clicked that when we arrived at this point where we realized, first of all, that the problem is really true. So we could replicate kind of the same pain, get the same kind of feedback from hundreds of clients, and then also kind of started with them discussing about the solution. And at some point we kind of had both, right, the problem and the solution together, and everyone confirmed basically that this is viable way and probably the right way to go about it. And then we were clear that kind of it clicked. It felt suddenly right to start actually building something.
Yeah, really interesting. So yeah, that you had that idea and then you identified that specific pain point that were common or transverse to all your potential clients. So yeah, that's a pretty clever way to address. Could you give us a quick snapshot of your company today and how many you were when you started? I think maybe you and your co-founder, but what is the company size today and where on the ellipse you are right now?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, again, as I said, we started being two co-founders. Basically, the official date when we incorporated is end of 2023, so in December 2023. And yeah, since then we grew quite fast. So we are now 12 people working on the problem. We currently count 8 customers, and yeah, are continuously growing up both the team and also the base of clients.
That's nice. Interesting. Okay, so can you share maybe a realization about your business when you started to really identify when you were developing that solution, solving that pain point? What was maybe a realization you got from an early feedback from your MVP, for example, when you deployed that at your customer factory?
So I mean, what is always, I think, nice to hear, and we get that quite often, is when you kind of show your prototype, your MVP, and the reply when you ask how do you think about it, and your client basically tells, oh, that's what I imagined, right? Because I think that's very critical, because after all, I think, yeah, kind of addressing a pain point, but just saying, yeah, we'll solve the pain point, will very quickly resonate with someone really experiencing the pain. But then if you get to the point where they actually start thinking about how they would see the solution, and you deliver exactly on that, I think that is I think what you should strive and aim for.
Yeah. So today, so you are still at the MVP stage, or you already have something that is like, production ready, or you thought that you already have 8 customers. So are you still in that stage of iterating with the customer, or is it something that you are still, production ready?
No, it's still a closed beta phase that we are in. So we currently are kind of selective with the companies that we work with, because we want to make sure that, well, they have the type of parts and the type of production that is actually, well, for us, solvable at this stage, so we can really address their pain. And yeah, I mean, we also think, I mean, we are very user centric in our core belief. So we really try only to build things that result from direct customer needs. So we, I think, are also going to keep that pipeline open for the near future, because I think it's a very important source of actual demand, right? If you actually solve something for, not just because you think it's right, but because you actually get the client paying you for doing so.
Okay, so how do you manage the feedback from 8 different customers, giving you feedback on the product? I can imagine that the feedback could be different depending on the customer, maybe the customer size or maybe the specific market they are in. So how do you manage that internally to then prioritize the roadmap for the future of the product?
I mean, at the moment, it's quite manageable. I think, again, as I mentioned, I think we typically take many iterations to just discuss the concept before we build the actual solution and ask for feedback. So at that stage, typically it's already worked out, and then the feedback is not so sparse, and so kind of there's not so much variance in the feedback anymore. So I think that's really important, right? To not build something before you really took the time to discuss it with many people, because then, yeah, you can also do some kind of expectation management and some streamlining of the feature requests, etc. Because if you, I think, yeah, start building too early without a very clear picture in mind of what you want, and you without the clear also iteration with different clients about what they think about that idea, then yeah, you might end up building something that is very rough, and then you get all these different feedbacks, and then it becomes complicated and you don't know which one to address, and etc. I think there it's really kind of following this lean principles where you try to be very like quick and dirty with the initial prototypes, and to try to kind of just iterate your idea many times before you actually go to actually building it, because otherwise, yeah, right, you're going to waste a lot of resources into building something that then 8 people say 8 different things, and then you're lost.
Yeah. So it's like it's like more partnership with your current customer than trying to iterate with them than pure client, using your product and just getting feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I mean that's I think, yeah, kind of the close beta stage that we are in.
Mm,
We really try to find the ones that can give us valuable feedback on iterating the product.
interesting. Okay. So is there something that you learned about your market during, that wasn't obvious at the beginning during that exploration phase?
Yes, I mean many things. I mean, in the end, right, as I said, we didn't bring any kind of expertise or prior knowledge to the market. So I mean, entering the machining market, to be very transparent for us, was like, yeah, but I mean, okay, it's an old process, right? I mean, we know how to build motors, how to build machines for many years, decades. I mean, even there's some of our clients that are more than 100 years old, right? So you expect, okay, they are set up, everything works and is running, and you wouldn't imagine how dynamic also these conservative industries are. I mean, there is always something you can improve, and which is, I think, also a good learning for generally building a startup, because I mean, you can always find improvements. It's never going to be like 100% converge, right? I mean, see it also every day if you use any of the infamous products, like, I don't know, your Slack or your Figma or whatever, right? There is always some things that don't properly work yet, and so you see even these big players. It's a constant improvement cycle, and I think that realization was interesting. And then also, I think I wasn't so clear about how important and key machining is to the world. I think we learned a lot of implications that it has. I mean, now I'm also, I think, one of the advertisers that always does the joke. I mean, mention any physical good that you use and basically depend on in your everyday life, and you can always find a link back to CNC machining, which was also not very clear for us from the beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting because we always talk about software, but hardware goods, product, physical goods. It's like, as you said, it's very still long process behind it, and yeah, what you said, it's really interesting. And also something interesting is you said that even big companies with 100 years of process and history are also looking and quite dynamic about looking for improvement. That's also interesting because usually those actors from the outside, we see them as really established, really hard to move their process or to change things. So maybe could you double click on that, what you discover? Is it a different department inside those companies, or is it really related to the person you are talking to at those companies?
I mean, it depends a bit on the exact structure. So structure, I mean, so I cannot give the general
Yeah.
truth here, but I mean, what I experience, right? There is, if for, let's say, exploration in novel markets, so it's about new technology that arrives in the market, or new types of, like, let's think about automotive, right? With the whole appearance of electric cars, right? So you basically need to foster some type of innovation that is basically typically driven by some innovation department, right? Where you're trying to find new business opportunities. But then That's I think the interesting part. There is the core operations team that actually does the things that were always been done. These people, they all are also, right, they also are human. They're also exploring different ways to improve their own life, and there also innovation happens, right? So even in a company where they know or they have been successful in doing something for decades or even centuries, you still always find room for improvement. And I think that's very important for especially um, yeah, it's an important learning for life, right? So there is always ways to improve, and it's never done, right? And there is not, I think, even for these very established large players. Of course, at some point you could stop innovating, but then this comes at a cost because at some point you're going to be outdated and you're going to be outrun by your competition that keeps improving. And so, yeah, this concept of maybe something we typically learn during studies or during school, where you get this homework assignment, you do it, you finish it, and then you're done, is something that doesn't translate to the real world because there you're never done. There is always improvement. You're always going to kind of iterate.
Yeah. That's right. That's so true. Okay, maybe more on your entrepreneur journey or founder journey. What did you learn about, starting with your co-founder and then growing the company? So in the course of nearly 2 years now, what was the maybe the the realization for you as, starting with 2 people to now around 20 people?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, right? I think it's very much shifting. I think constantly. So maybe initially, right, when you're two, you can discuss everything. Also, when you're a team of three, you can discuss everything. This works for quite some time, but there is also then times where you have to basically start managing, right? So your job is no more just doing things and then, well, informing everyone around it and discussing it with everyone, but your job becomes creating structure so everyone and each one can basically work to get together, ideally independent of you. And this was something that I think I found quite a big insight, right? If you look at all these books that exist around successful entrepreneurship, I mean, the typical thing is that a good manager is a good manager if the company runs without him. And that's kind of contrarian to, I mean, the initial years where it's all about the founders and the company gets backed and support because of the founders, and the founders are the one developing the idea that, but then in the end, right, you at some point it transitions to you trying to set up structures that actually work without you. So you can actually kind of disappear tomorrow, but somehow the machine would still keep running. And that's, I think, was an interesting learning. So yeah.
Okay, so now I can imagine that you are more managing than building. Are you still building? Are you still craving for that build?
I mean, we did a very early split so that I was kind of taking up the managerial roles, or in the initial phases, it was especially the roles that are linked to outreach, so sales and fundraising and public speaking, and Daniel was rather focusing on development. But yeah, I mean that's also the same, right? So I think for Daniel, okay, it's more and more organizing everything and making sure everyone has what they need and to be really efficient. And for me, it also starts to becoming, um, yeah, maybe spending less time on the actual outreach, but maybe then only take the time for the key discussions during the sales process to really explain, for example, the tech, because maybe, yeah, client is interested in understanding a little bit better how things work under the hood. But you constantly, I think, change and try to basically, yeah, in the end, it's all about trying not to be all over the place, because no single human, like the bigger you become as a company, the more tasks that there are. And if you try to be all over the place, you're just going to be slowing everyone down instead of helping them. So I think it's really important to prioritize and always keep identifying basically your role and your task in the organization. So you really need to make sure to figure out which is now that thing you can do that helps the overall thing the most, which is opposed to, I think, the classical job where you get basically a fixed role and then you just keep doing that thing. But it's much more flexible.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. So if you could go back in time, what would be the first advice you would give to yourself, back then, 2 years ago, or maybe even before that? What would be the first advice you would give to yourself?
I think I would probably, I mean, maybe that would actually destroy the workings, but I try to kind of instill some trust, because I think, yeah, when you're early, you try to, I don't know, you're striving so much and you're not really trusting the process, but it's more like you're like, I don't know, you're always kind of, I think, yeah, I don't know, more afraid of what might or might not happen. But I think if you kind of trust the process, right, and you follow the rule book and you're honest about the feedback you get from the market and you put effort into learning from that feedback and you keep improving and iterating and you test different things and yeah, again, you're honest with the feedback you get from these different tests and you adopt and you learn, I think you're gonna get there. I mean, of course, there's always some luck needed. I mean, but I think it's not worth stressing out about things that you cannot influence yourself, right? So I think you should just have this kind of baseline trust that if you put in the work, then chances are high that you're gonna get to a good outcome, and it's not worth stressing out and kind of freaking out about things you cannot do. I mean, you can always iterate, as I said, you can always iterate, you can always improve, you can always get more feedback, but then there is other things that you just cannot actively influence, right? You can just put in the work and make sure you spend the effort necessary. But yeah, there is also other things where you just need to kind of keep the chill and don't have yourself kind of be disrupted by or basically stopped by insecurity.
Validate your market and then put in the work, and it's more right with the flow. So it's like, don't stress, as you said, don't stress with the things that are out of your control, and just go with the right. That's a really interesting advice, because yeah, we are always stressing about things that usually we can control, and is it luck or not luck? Yeah, we never know, but validate your market and then put in the work, and then just see where it goes and iterate on the feedback you get. That's an interesting way of.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, you can just put in the work, and then maybe someone decides to work with you and give you money, for either an investor that wants to invest in you, or it's a customer that wants to work with you. But in the end, it's kind of a numbers game, right? So you just need to make sure that you iterate and you learn as fast as you can and you keep improving. But then being stressed out about the guy not responding, or I don't know, it's like that kind of puts your energy somewhere where you don't want it to disappear, right? Because this is out of your control. It's up to the guy to decide whether he wants to work with you, and so you should try to do the best always and iterate and again improve, but not be stressed out about these things that are the decision of other people or whatever that are out of your control. And yeah.
So what's next for Manukai?
So I mean, we are very, I think, working hard to get to the next phase, right? So to can go away from the closed beta where we are now to the open beta where we're going to be actually pushing our product to market. So that's going to be exciting. I think it's going to also be a big shift from say development to also the operation side of things, right? So where you need to make sure that your services are up and running all the time and people can easily flag if something is not working and you can quickly react and fix it for them. So that's going to be interesting. And yeah, looking forward to that.
And that's the phase when you go from developing and building behind the curtains basically and go into public and see that maybe a wider range of feedback or signals from the market. Yeah, I think that's really an exciting phase, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice. Yeah. We'll definitely follow that. So just to end our conversation, where can people follow your journey, follow what you are building?
So it's super easy. I mean, I only use LinkedIn, so please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. We have a company page, of course, and then the personal page of me and my co-founders. You can always follow us there. We have a website, so there, of course, if there is major releases, it's also going to be on our website. Yeah,
Okay,
if you have some specific requests, always feel free to reach out to me.
I will add your LinkedIn in the show note and also the link to your website so people can reach out and follow you and follow the next step as you are going to enter the really the go-to market and going public. So that will be a really interesting step to follow. So okay, so thanks Pascal for sharing your journey and your learning. That was really interesting. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the show and then see you on the next episode. I'm Padrig Guillard, helping B2B company to boost their conversion. See you in the next episode.